Momentum comes slowly, one day at a time. We really need to develop a one day at a time concept of life, and we need to perceive things through that particular lens. All I have to do is stay sober today. That's my job, if you will. My job, my purpose today, keeping it simple, is to stay sober today. It is always an honor and a joy for me to talk about transformation, especially when it concerns early recovery from addiction. I want to preface this by saying, from a certain perspective, no matter where you are on your path of recovery, on your path through life, since we're all beginners to our next step, we haven't been there yet, so we're a beginner to what's yet to come. Each of us is, in a way, from a certain perspective, attached, let's just say, to our current way of seeing things, to our current belief system, to our current level of consciousness. So while this is specifically geared towards people in early recovery, in a way, every one of us is in early recovery if you think of it from the perspective of wanting to reach the next step. So I'm excited to share with you a little bit of my story and hopefully to mine some of the most important aspects that I learned about addiction and recovery, to look at some of the pitfalls, what we run into in early recovery, and to provide resources and immediately applicable strategies to help anybody who wants to get sober and or stay sober from, when we're talking about drugs, alcohol, but it could also be food, it could also be sex addiction, it could also be codependency, relationship issues, it could be money, gambling, debting issues, could be technology, all of it. So wherever we get tripped up and we get stuck in patterns of behavior that are self-harming and that create consequences, negative consequences for us and for others, we're going to look at that as addiction. And so this is all about moving out of that pattern of behavior, literally transforming ourselves, expanding our awareness, expanding our consciousness, and really being in recovery. So I'll begin, as I did this morning, just a little bit ago, I just said to you, good morning. Now, I don't know what time it is when you're watching this, but good morning. It's always going to be morning when we wake up to the next level of being. And why that's so important is, as you watch this, I hope you can be kind to yourself and recognize that you're right on time. You're right in the right place. And everything in your life to this moment had to take place for you to get to this moment. And so there's an acceptance as we come into this discussion, this exploration together. Recovery begins always with honesty. There's a moment, some people call it a bottom, where we recognize a level of truth that we may not have seen before. We recognize that the way we've been living, how we've been living, the way we've been seeing things is not working. But we don't yet know what else to do. We don't necessarily have a strategy. We don't have a solution. And so the bottom is that first moment of truth where we can fully admit that to ourselves. Self-honesty. And recovery begins there. The possibility of recovery begins there. And so self-honesty sounds like, for me, what it sounded like when I was first getting sober was, I have really dealt myself into a corner. I I don't know how to live well. I can see that I'm hurting myself. I can't stop doing drugs and alcohol. I just can't stop. I've tried so many times, and I've ended up here again and again and again, and it's getting worse. And furthermore, I'm not sure what to do. The things that are being suggested to me or have been suggested to me, like going to meetings, 12-step meetings, getting involved in recovery with other people, I have resisted those things completely. And I have been unwilling to try new things in my life. I've made a decision in my mind, I really want to change, but I haven't made any changes in my life, in the actions, in the people that I'm hanging out with, in my environments. I say that I want to change, but I'm not making any real changes. And so what ends up happening is, the old saying goes, you will keep getting what you've gotten. If you keep doing what you've done, you'll keep getting what you've gotten. And I lived that out 1,000 times in my life, in those moments, days, weeks, months, before I was finally ready to tell the truth and to release, to a certain extent, my grip on what I thought was life. There was a surrender there. That surrender is a letting go. It's not a bad word, it's a great word. And there's that opening, that moment of, okay, I can actually tell the truth to myself. I can see I'm in trouble. I can see that I need help. And I am going to actually ask for help and open myself up to the next level. And that's that bottom that many people come to, and it's a sacred place. Because from that bottom, an entirely new life can spring forth, which has been my direct experience and the direct experience of millions and millions of people, particularly in the last 80 years. So self-honesty is going to be the thing that serves you in early recovery. And the first aspect of it, the first place we want to really understand ourselves at a deeper level, is to assess what's actually going on. So are you still using drugs and alcohol, or still acting out in very painful, addictive ways? Are you in that stage? There's no shame here. Understand, now we're into this looking at ourselves and trying to be honest with ourselves about where we're at. You know, if I get on this yoga mat and I bend forward from my waist, and my goal in my mind is to touch my toes, but I find that my hamstrings are so tight that I can't even get my hands past my knees. It would be silly for me to expect me to be able to touch my toes in that moment. And if I in fact tried and really used my will to push to touch my toes, which would be an incorrect effort, what I would end up doing is injuring myself. That's what I would call a dishonest practice of yoga. So in recovery and life, it's no different. We have to assess where we are. In this analogy of being on the yoga mat, if I have tight hamstrings, what I simply say to myself is, let me just go to where I feel my edge is, and let me breathe and relax and just feel that edge, not push beyond it. Let me acknowledge the edge. Let me acknowledge that for today, I cannot touch my toes, and that's okay. But what I will do is I will come to my edge. That's honest. I'll breathe, and I'll see if I can get the body to release some of its tension so that over time, with consistency, I'll be invited into greater flexibility. Well, it's exactly the same thing with recovery. We have our bottom. We admit to ourselves, okay, left to my own devices, things aren't going great. So I need help. I'm going to open myself up to help. And I want to find wise teachers, wise teachings, and a loving, supportive community that can help me to move forward onto my path of recovery and see where that can go for me. And that's exactly the whole point of Recovery 2.0, of our sacred community that we have that supports each other as we move forward along a path of discovery. We have teachers, we have teachings, and we have a loving, supportive community. This also exists out in the world in the form of 12-step programs, many other communities out there of recovery, spiritual communities, religious communities. There's so many ways to connect in with teachings. And the teachings that we're working on in particular are the teachings of Recovery 2.0 here. Once you have experienced and have demonstrated that ability to express yourself honestly, first to yourself and then to another, we enter this assessment. Are you still using, and it's hard for you to put even a couple days together. That's okay. Are you a week sober, but no particular program, not following any particular thing? Are you a month, 60 days, 90 days, 6 months, 9 months, a year, multiple years? Have you been years sober before, but experienced relapse and then had to sort of begin counting days again? Are you sober maybe for months, years, decades, but you're in that place where you felt like there was something more and you feel stuck in relationships, stuck creatively? Maybe there's health issues, physical issues, mental, emotional issues, spiritual disconnection issues. Any of those scenarios represents a person who's interested in moving from where they are into a new place. So we're all looking for that next step. Here's what I learned in my early recovery. Because I had been engaged in a day-to-day way of thinking that led me to use drugs and alcohol, I now had to change my actions, my routines, so that I was engaged in a day-to-day process that would support me in not using drugs and alcohol, that would support me in those moments, and they will come, where I felt a sense of craving, where I was triggered and I just wanted to use. I need a routine, I need a community, I need a response strategy to my mind, which for the last number of days, weeks, months, and years has been engaged in a way of being that leads into using drugs and alcohol or whatever your addictive behavior might be. So what I got was I needed to be engaged in my recovery the same way I had been engaged in my addiction. I had to actually take actions every day. Every single day, I had to take actions that supported me in my recovery. What were those actions? Number one, I got to a meeting every day for 90 days. We talk about, 90 meetings in 90 days. Why? Why do that? Because we're building new neural circuitry. We're literally building new habits into the mind and the body. And it's not something that can be done once a week or once every couple weeks or even twice a week, but it's something that has to work daily in our life. Now we have Recovery 2.0 meetings, and those meetings are every day of the week, and they're available to you at r20.com/meetings. And there you can pick your meetings each day, and you can get to those online meetings, which are facilitated by Recovery 2.0 coaches and other people who have done quite a bit of work and are experienced and wise and solid in their recovery. At those meetings, you can meet those facilitators, and you can also meet other people who are committed to this path of discovery in recovery. So the first thing is adopt a routine into your life that supports recovery, and that's meetings. If you are called to go to Alcoholics Anonymous meetings, Narcotics Anonymous meetings, There's ACOA meetings, that's Adult Children of Alcoholics, for people who grew up in alcoholic homes. There's Al-Anon for people who are dealing with loved ones who are struggling with addiction. There's CODA, Codependencies Anonymous, for people who are struggling with codependency in relationships. There's all kinds of meetings out there, more than I could possibly name. Literally over 200 different meetings have adopted the 12 steps into their life. When you go to Recovery 2.0 meetings, you're going to see that there's a meditation at the beginning. We read an adaptation of the 12 steps that we refer to as the 12 efforts. And we really discuss the expansion of consciousness and the idea of transformation and discovery. That's really where we spend our time, is how do we solve this problem? How do we support each other? And what are the best practices, not just in terms of talking, that's very important, but also in terms of yoga practice, meditation, and the expansion of awareness and consciousness. Okay. Other ways that we shift our routines, and this is one of the most important lessons that I can pass on to you or anybody. If only somebody had so clearly laid this out to me in early recovery, it would have helped. But I must say that they did do a pretty good job of the idea that I shouldn't ever go into the bad neighborhood of my mind by myself and stay there. Now, anybody who's ever struggled with addiction, we can relate to the idea that the mind, our mind, especially in active addiction, is a bad neighborhood. It is filled with thoughts and ghosts and memories, and out of those thoughts and ghosts and memories come emotions, and then ultimately actions. And as I've said, and as we all know from our personal experience, these actions are leading us to continue our addictive behavior rather than move beyond it. So the mind, in the untrained addictive state, and for a long time in recovery, until we train the mind, is not necessarily our best friend. They say the mind is a terrible master, but a wonderful servant. So one of the most important lessons that we're going to learn on our path of discovery in recovery and Recovery 2.0 is to train the mind. Now, since we understand through our surrender, we're able to consider the idea that our mind is not necessarily helping us all the time. That presents a bit of a problem. If my mind is not helping me, what am I supposed to do? Who am I supposed to listen to? Which of the voices in my head might be the good voice, the intuitive voice, the higher self, the wise mind? How do I discern that voice from the other voices? At first, you might not be able to, because it takes a little while to clear out the cobwebs and to recover our sense of intuition, to recover our relationship with our wisdom mind, so that we are able to actually make that discernment to know which of the voices in our head we should actually listen to. So when we are facing decisions in our life, which happens every day, when we are trying to figure out our relationships, when we are beset by anger, worry, fear, anxiety, jealousy, judgment, and we feel really down, depressed, negative, maybe even morbidly so, the directive is pick up the phone and call someone else in recovery right away. In 28 years of recovery now for me, I have learned that when I get into an emotional place that's dark, dense, that I can't solve and don't have a way through in about 5 minutes, I'm on the phone to my teachers, my sponsors, my coaches. If it's food related, I'm on the phone with people who I talk to about food. If it's relationship related, I'm on the phone with people who I talk to about relationships, all relationships. Whatever it is that's bothering me, I have the humility. I have the absolute humility to know I don't have to figure out everything in my life on my own. And that has been the greatest gift to me in my recovery. So at 28 years, I humbly come to you and I say, when I get into trouble in my mind, I do not stay there by myself. So one of the routines, in addition to just going to meetings, on a one day at a time basis, you need to get into the habit of picking up the phone or getting on Zoom or connecting with somebody in that moment, right then and right there. Because why? Because we humbly understand the power of this mind in both directions. It can be very powerful in a positive direction. It can be very destructive in a negative direction. And each of us has seen that in our own lives. So the mechanism that we're developing is to recognize, oh, I'm in trouble. I'm in a little bit of trouble. I don't know how to solve this uncomfortable feeling. Tommy mentioned that if I have resentment, fear, anger, anxiety, depression, that I shouldn't sit with that too long. If I don't have a way to move through that, I should pick up the phone and call somebody in recovery. And so that's a big, immediately you sort of recognize the power of our community, how important our community is. I mean, because without being dramatic, I won't even talk about life and death. I'll just say we save each other's serenity every single day. And we might just save someone's life. And we might just prevent someone from relapse. And we might be able to talk somebody down off the cliff and say, hey, I love you. I'm here for you. And I want you to know that the things that you're thinking about right now are a little tilted. Let's talk it through. Let's just talk it through. And so that's what I've done over 28 years. I did it in my first week of recovery. I did it in my first month of recovery. And then later on, it became just a second nature, like, oh, okay, what I'm doing is I'm changing the way that I react to adversity. I'm changing the way that I react to life's challenges. And what I'm doing is I'm opening myself up to very loving counsel from a select group of people that I happen to love and that I know will be there for me. And what people always will tell you at the beginning, and I will tell you this now, that what you're also doing is you're preparing yourself to be of maximum value to other people. Because when you get onto the other side of you're no longer trying just to get sober, but you've been sober for a long time, and you start to develop a sense of stability, a sense of presence, your life starts to get bigger, your body and your mind start to heal, your intuitive capabilities come back, you're going to be in a position to help many, many people. And that's one of the greatest joys of getting to be on this path. And in fact, it's not just a joy, but it's like a magical elixir. Being of service to another person in recovery is like a magical elixir. It's like getting onto the express train to joy and to bliss. Immediately you feel that sense of self-worth. And ultimately we realize we don't have to wait till we're completely healed to be of service. We can be of service right now. And we recognize that as we heal, we'll get to be of service in bigger and bigger ways, as is appropriate based upon who we are and the decisions that we make in life. So staying on this creation of new routines for a moment. We're getting to meetings every day. Now, that means you're spending 1 hour out of the day at a meeting. And you're going to make that commitment for 90 days because you understand that this has been tough for you to break through this thing. You want to get some momentum. And momentum comes slowly, one day at a time. And I want to stay on that for a minute. With regards to creating new routines in your life, we really need to develop a one day at a time concept of life. And we need to perceive things through that particular lens. It used to be, I think for me at least, when I heard one day at a time, I would think about, all I have to do is stay sober today. That's my job, if you will. My job, my purpose today, keeping it simple, is to stay sober today. And by the way, that's actually true. That's actually true. That's the highest priority of the day. If I, even now at 28 years, or especially now at 28 years, if I go out and use drugs and alcohol, I want you to consider, as you know me, I want you to consider what would be lost there. And you don't even know what's in my head, so the confusion that I would create for myself, the pain and the suffering and the regret and the remorse that would be there would be, I don't know, I don't even know how to categorize it. It would just be horrible. So one day at a time, even now at 28 years, my highest priority is I'm going to bed tonight sober. Now I don't think about that or worry about that anymore, because I'm fairly confident that that's what's going to happen. And I need to stay on my routines that keep me primarily in the frequency of honesty, first, honesty to myself. I have to live according to this heart. I didn't know how to live according to this heart at first, but now I do. It took a little while, and that's why at the very, very beginning, when I had ideas running around my head about this girl or this plan for a business and that plan or how this person wronged me and that person wronged me, and oh my God, I'm so angry, I'm so judgmental, and all these things were happening in early recovery, I didn't yet know what this heart wanted. That's why I put myself in front of people who had been where I was and now were at the next level so that they could guide me. They became my teachers, my sponsors. So these routines are based on the idea that each day you do it again. You build consistency, you build stability, you build momentum. And this is not specific to the 12 steps. This is in everything you do in life, because human beings operate on a one day at a time clock. We have to wake up, we have to do it again. We have to do our practices, we have to become aware, we have to work on being the best that we can be, we have to feed ourselves, we have to eliminate waste, we have to have our interactions in the world and seek our creative expression and the fulfillment of our heart's desire. That's what we are ultimately here to do. That's why we came here. And that's why when we're doing that, things feel so good. And that when we're not doing that, things feel very difficult. So adopting a one day at a time life for me was originally, I just have to go to bed tonight sober. And what a wonderful thing to keep on the top of your mind. Now, if you're trying to get sober and you're watching this, or you're in your first week or first month or first 6 months, or whatever amount of time it is where you're still thinking about the possibility of using drugs and alcohol or acting out in another addictive way, you're still in early recovery. And that's okay. That's not like a point of shame. This is where you have to be honest with yourself. Am I still in that place where I'm threatened with relapse? I'm vulnerable to relapse. Am I still in that place where something could pull me so far off track where I could use today? Now, to me, that's a very, very good thing to admit to yourself. Not shamefully, but powerfully. Okay, this is where I am today. I'm counting days. I'm moving forward. I'm vulnerable. Yeah, I think about it still. No problem. Okay, so it's a one day at a time thing. And for you, you want to be thinking primarily, I got to go to bed tonight sober. Come what may, in this day, I've got to get to bed sober tonight, because that's going to be the biggest victory for me. Huge victory. And so that's where, one day at a time begins there. And an extension of that idea, to build upon that idea one day at a time is very, 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 very much about an entire way of living life. Releasing the past, not worrying and getting caught up in the future. I call that borrowing trouble from the future. We don't have to borrow trouble from the future. We can just be here in this day, doing our practices, working to bring more and more awareness and consciousness to the decisions, the choices, the words, and the actions of our life. That is primarily our job in our entire life. No matter who we are, where we are, no matter how advanced or far along a road we might be, or if we're just beginning a new goal, we're pursuing something new, we're going to want to always bring more consciousness, more awareness, and to be more skillful at being us in this life. So this one day at a time concept, turns out, is a complete philosophy. It's a philosophy for life. It means we can truly work on ourselves at the level of mind, body, and spirit so that we truly can release the past. We can do the talk therapy, which I'm a big proponent of. We also can bring in the yoga, the meditation, moving the body, working on managing stress, eating well, nourishing the cells of the body, hydrating well, resting. We can start to live in such a way, organized around the idea of one day at a time, that we really, really begin to build momentum. Now, all those things that I mentioned can become paralyzing for a person who's at the beginning of this road. Again, if you're at the beginning, all you need to do, all you want to do, is simply go to bed that night sober. Say thank you before you go to bed. Wake up in the morning and say a little prayer of support, asking for support. Whether you believe in God, spirituality, if you're an atheist, agnostic, religious, it doesn't matter at all. The only thing that matters, you're welcome. You're welcome here. You understand? On the planet, you're welcome here because you're here. So the only thing that matters is how can you access what's in your heart and live freely, comfortably, lovingly, blissfully from that place. That's it. So at the beginning, you got to keep it super simple. So if you're in this, like this program with me, this 8-week program, and we're assigning all these different exercises, all of which are beautiful and wonderful, but maybe the highest priority for you, based on your own self-assessment, which is honest, is, okay, I really just need to get to a meeting today. I need to communicate about what's coming up for me honestly with other people in recovery. And I need to go to bed tonight sober, clean. If you can do that at the end of this 8-week program, or wherever you're watching this video, at the end of a period of days, you can look back in 50 days from now, 60 days from now, and I can guarantee you, if you did nothing else but went to a meeting every day, shared honestly about the emotions and the things that were on your mind, started to connect with some people in recovery. If you were to do that and then go to bed every night without using drugs or alcohol or acting out in other addictive ways, you would look back at the end of 60 days and you would say a couple things. One, you would say, I can't believe I did it. Wow, I can't believe that I was able to sort of do this. I've never been able to do that before. And you would remark that it felt like it passed in a second, and it also felt like it took an eternity. And that will speak to somewhat of a reorganization of the way we perceive time. Because when we start to change in this way and we really adopt a one day at a time life, our interaction with past, present, and future, we do find has some interesting changes to it. So one day at a time, this philosophy of life is a part of building new routines into your life and building stability and momentum as you go along. Okay, so we've spoken about getting to meetings every day, and we've spoken about picking up the phone and communicating with another person in recovery. Whenever we get into a tough spot, that becomes, that's like a mechanism, that's a practice that we're building into our life. It's going to become second nature. So we've got those things. Now let's talk a little bit about teaching. So when I say teaching, I mean, let's talk about tapping into wisdom. We must tap into wisdom each day. Now, part of the wisdom you'll tap into will happen at the meetings you go to. You're going to hear people share things and you're going to think, wow, that's amazing. Or you'll get an insight. Something will come into your mind and you'll recognize, wow, that's an amazing insight. Let me write that down. We need to put ourselves in front of people and in front of books and in front of media and in front of scriptures that elevate us up. As a regular practice, we begin to get involved and interested in wisdom teachings. For me, the first wisdom teaching or structure of wisdom that I entered in my recovery was the 12 steps. Incredibly valuable process for me. I'll break it down for you like this. I admitted that I needed some more power to solve this problem. I admitted that, and I really came to believe in my heart and soul that I could access more power. And then I decided to dedicate myself to the path of discovery, which all I had to do was observe my own life with support from other people in recovery, and I would be able to access that power regularly one day at a time. And then I had some work to do. I had to review my life, particularly looking at my resentments, negativity that I was holding in my mind or in my body. I had to look at those resentments. I had to understand them. And in understanding them, I understood where I had gotten off track. I understood myself at such a deep level. And having come to that understanding, I needed to tell another person about it. And working with the unseen realm, that's spirituality, and working with the quantum field, if you're an atheist or agnostic, that might work for you better, quantum field or God, higher power, great spirit, nature, whatever your thing is, developing a relationship with that thing, which is the organizing, creative, transformative consciousness that's underlying the entire universe, beginning to develop a relationship with whatever that thing was as it expressed itself to me, I could now tell that thing and express my findings to that consciousness. Say, hey, here's what I found. Here's what I found. It's like talking to a friend who isn't physically there, but who you can sense on subtler levels. Okay, here, let me tell you what I found. Having done that work, I could then go deep into prayer and meditation to ready myself to repair some of the damage that I had done to myself and to other people. And I could make that a mission for a little while until I was really done. I could actually look my parents in the eyes and say to them, here's what happened as I see it. Here's how I see I was hurtful to you. Here's how I see that I caused some damage in our relationship. I'd like to make it up to you. Can you tell me what your perspective is? And could you help me understand how I could make it up to you? And I could do that mission with anyone in the world that I had hurt. And now that I had more access to honesty, I could see clearly, wow, I really behaved selfishly here. I was dishonest here. Wow, I can see that this behavior brought about a whole chain of events that ended up being so self-harming and harming to others. And I could admit that because I now was on a different footing, that I had enough power to look at my own faults and to correct them. Having done that mission and completed that mission, all I had to do now was to build upon the spiritual connection and to become a more skillful human being in my relationships today on the planet Earth. So there was going to be more yoga and meditation involved there. There was going to be an evening ritual where I could review the day and release and fix any of the challenges that came up on a day-to-day basis. And then ultimately all of this was leading to service. That I was given the luxury of being clean energetically so that I had space to actually be of service in my life. And then the real bliss and magic, woo! It started to happen. It really started to happen. And all I had ever asked for was, I just want to stop thinking about drugs and alcohol. I just want to be on a positive tip. I don't want to be stuck in negativity, stuck in judgment, have no space, time, or energy to actually be me. And I could never do it until I accessed the wisdom and the process of these 12 steps. Oh my God, it was the most incredible thing. And it has resulted in just pure magic. And it's available to everybody. And that was my path. So the 12 steps, I strongly recommend getting into that work and finding a sponsor and doing that work. You can also find one of the Recovery 2.0 coaches, and they can work you through the 12 efforts, which is essentially the same as the 12 steps, with some of the language slightly altered to make it more inclusive and more open to more people. So we changed, for example, the word God, which is so confusing and sometimes off-putting for people. We replaced that word with the word consciousness or universe. We took out the gender references to God of he, a masculine reference, because that's tough for people, for many people, not just women, but men also. It's confusing. So we just created some slight alterations, maintaining the spirit of the steps that we felt would be open to people who were in a conversation about consciousness. So that's the 12 efforts. And so you can check out r2o.com/meetings. You can find a sponsor there. You can ask the facilitators and other people, hey, I'd like to do the work of the steps, and you will find yourself in that work. It's so valuable. It will serve you for the rest of your life. And as you're going through that work, you're going to experience a lot of profound shifts. If you're at the beginning of this process of recovery and you've had a very hard time getting sober, or not, I suggest every human being on the planet, whether they identify with being in recovery, whether they identify with having struggled with addiction or not, everybody should do this work. This is universally applicable, relevant, amazing work to build one's spiritual maturity, to build one's emotional maturity, and to help a person move further in life than they might have been able to otherwise. So I just can't say enough about that path. I wrote a book called Recovery 2.0, and the entire second section of the book, so the entire second section, is devoted to the 12 steps, how you can get the most out of it, and what are some of the pitfalls to look for. So if you have that book, great. Get it if you don't, or listen to it on audiobook. Audiobook.com has it, and you can really glean a lot from that second section about how you can approach the steps and what some of the best practices will be and what to look out for. Okay, so that's talking about doctrine, teaching, wisdom. You on a one day at a time basis, accessing a doctrine, a wise spiritual doctrine that helps you move forward. Now, very quickly, I want to address resistance. First, I want to say that the 12 steps are not the only way to get sober, not the only way to move along a spiritual path. There are infinite ways, in fact. This happens to work really well for people who struggle with addiction. I believe it would work really well to further anybody's spiritual path. But you need to understand, and I need to make sure you understand, this is not the only way. There are other recovery paths. There are as many approaches to the 12 steps as you might find an approach to any religion or spirituality. And it's going to really depend upon who you connect with. Who your teacher is going to influence your experience of the 12 steps or any other religion or spiritual path. So if you have resistance to the idea that, oh my God, Tommy, you're pushing me into the 12 steps, I'm really not. What I am suggesting is that you have an experience of the 12 steps for yourself so that you can make up your own mind about what it brought to your life and what your experience was having actually gone through that experience. Okay. The resistance that came up for me in my early recovery was nothing short of epic. People were telling me, keep coming back, go to these meetings, get a sponsor, work the steps. And everything in my mind was like basically reduced down to two words: why and no. Basically, I was like, why and no. I'm not going to do this. Why do I have to do this? Why don't other people seem to do this or seem to have to do this? I don't believe that this is going to work. Why does this work this way? Why should I do this way? And even with all of my resistance, number one, people still helped me. They still answered my questions. They still lovingly gave their time to me. And I was still able to access the brilliance and the genius that exists within those steps. Here's the great news. As I started to access the genius in the 12 steps, I also started to access the genius in a whole bunch of other spiritual paths. I started to read Rumi, the 13th century Sufi poet. The way that he spoke about the divine and God and his thirst to connect, I really related to it. I started to look at some of the original teachings of Jesus, and I found like there's wisdom here too. And I started to look at Judaism and Hinduism and Buddhism and Islam, and I started to become interested in just the truth. What was the truth as it was expressing itself through me? And the most incredible thing happened for me. My mind opened to lots of different teachings. So for me, for some reason, I needed that. I needed to find a spirituality based in truth that, in a way, it transcended any particular path, but any particular path could lead there. It was the most incredible thing. So that was one of the joys for me of starting to open my mind and my heart to new teachings and to be able to look anywhere, not with disdain or negativity, like I used to, where I was religiously prejudiced, like, religions have caused more pain, more suffering, more war, more horror than almost any other organizations. I actually believe that might be true. But that doesn't mean that if I went to the doctrine and I looked at the actual text, that there wasn't actually some truth there and some beauty there. If people had congregated and tried to manipulate that truth and try to have their way be the one way or the right way, well, that was their business. And I wasn't pulled or called to that particular approach. But for anybody who was willing to read and look and study and learn and really keep an open mind and say, how does this apply to my life? That ended up being the thing that opened up my entire life to another level of recovery because I could start to find the truth everywhere. The 12 steps were my foundation for recovery. And then I started to look everywhere to build upon what I had learned in that foundation. Yoga came into my life very early in my recovery. I worked out the tension in my body. And yoga can become a daily practice for you as well, even in early recovery, as long as you keep in mind that the one and the only most important thing is that you go to bed tonight sober, because without that, all bets are off. So the thing to remember, we're building new routines in our life that support us in our recovery, in our discovery. We look at our life. Where are we suffering? Where are we holding on to negativity? And we talk to people every day in recovery about what's coming up for us in our mind. We talk to people every day, and we get in the habit of sharing. We find a teaching like the 12 steps, like the book Recovery 2.0, like many, many other books and other scriptures. We throw ourselves into that teaching to begin to make sense out of what's going on in our life, in our mind, in our emotional body. And we begin to heal. And we do it steadily, slowly. We do it one day at a time. If you're in the 8-week awakening program, you absolutely can be in this program and benefit from it. I wish I had the 8-week awakening program when I was 1 day sober. And I wish someone had said to me, yes, you need to go to a meeting every day. Okay, that's going to be your priority. And guess what? There's all these other resources available to you so that when you have a tough moment, or maybe a moment of inspiration, you can turn to the resources, to the people, to the community, to the meetings, to the yoga classes, to the meditation, to the love missions that we're doing. You can turn to any one of those things, and you can further make this day, this 1 day right here, a day that when you lie down tonight and you go to bed sober, you can say to yourself, wow, this was something special. I can see that even as a sober person, I'm learning now that I'm going to have joy in this life. That I can transform from a person who once did drugs, did alcohol, acted out in addictive ways, that I'm changing. I don't know what the change is going to look like. I don't know what it's going to feel like ultimately. I guess I'm going to get to experience it 1 day at a time. And you start to realize, oh my God, I've been off track. I never knew there was a way, but now I know. And I'm going to wake up tomorrow morning sober, and I'm going to get an opportunity to do it again. I'll leave you with this. If you're listening to this, in my opinion, the time has come for you to make the change that you know you must make. Any doubts that you have, any thoughts you have of returning back to drinking, back to drugs, back to addictive behaviors, that's just the ego mind terrified of change. Any resistance you have, ego mind terrified of change. 1 day at a time, you rise up above that mind. 1 day at a time, you take actions that support you and your higher mind and your heart in moving forward so that you can live a life of love, connection, fulfillment. It's absolutely here. It's absolutely now. And you absolutely can access it if you want it.